creating a rough draft and avoiding plagiarism. At last, you are ready to begin writing the rough draft of your paper. Putting your thinking and research into words is exciting. It can also be challenging. In this section, you will learn strategies for handling the more challenging aspects of writing a research paper, such as integrating material from your sources, citing information correctly, and avoiding any misuse of your sources. The structure of a research paper. Research papers generally follow the same basic structure: an introduction that presents the writer's thesis, a body section that develops the thesis with supporting points and evidence, and a conclusion that revisits the thesis and provides additional insights or suggestions for further research. Your writing voice will come across most strongly in your introduction and conclusion as you work to attract your readers and establish your thesis. These sections usually do not cite sources at length. They focus on the big picture, not specific details. In contrast, the body of your paper will cite sources extensively. As you present your ideas, you will support your points with details from your research. Writing your introduction. There are several approaches to writing an introduction, each of which fulfills the same goals. The introduction should get the reader's attention, provide background information, and present the writer's thesis. Many writers like to begin with one of the following catchy openers, also known as a hook. So here are different ways to write a surprising hook to grab the reader's attention. And that's the first sentence of your essay. A surprising fact, a thought-provoking question, an attention-getting quote, a brief anecdote that illustrates a larger concept, a connection between your topic and your reader's experiences. The next few sentences place the opening in context by presenting background information. From there, the writer builds towards a thesis, which is placed at the end of the introduction. Think of your thesis as a signpost that lets your reader know in what direction the paper is headed. Writing your conclusion. Writing your conclusion. In your introduction, you tell readers where they are headed. In your conclusion, you recap where they have been. For this reason, some writers prefer to write their conclusions soon after they have written their introduction. However, this method may not work for all writers. Other writers prefer to write their conclusion at the end of the paper, after writing the body paragraphs. No process is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. Find the one that best suits you. No matter when you compose the conclusion, it should sum up your main ideas and revisit your thesis. The conclusion should not simply echo the introduction or rely on bland summary statements such as, "In this paper, I have demonstrated that." In fact, avoid repeating your thesis verbatim from the thesis. Restate your thesis in different words that reflect the new perspective gained through your research. This helps keep your ideas fresh for your readers. An effective writer might conclude a paper by asking a new question the research inspired, revisiting an anecdote presented earlier, or reminding readers of how the topic relates to their lives. Writing at work. If your job requires writing or reading scientific papers, it helps to understand how professional researchers use the structure described in this section. A scientific paper begins with an abstract that briefly summarizes the entire paper. The introduction explains the purpose of the research, briefly summarizes previous research, and presents the researcher's hypothesis. The body provokes details about the study, such as who participated in it and what the researchers measured and what results they recorded. The conclusion presents the researcher's interpretation of the data of what they learned. Using source material in your paper. One of the challenges of writing a research paper is successfully integrating your ideas with material from your sources. Your paper must explain what you think, and it will, or else it will read like a disconnected string of facts. You need to support your ideas with research. And so in the body paragraphs of your paper, you will need to integrate ideas carefully at the paragraph level and at the sentence level. You will use topic sentences in your body paragraphs to make sure readers understand the significance of any facts, details, or quotations you cite. You will also include sentences that transition from ideas from your research, either within a paragraph or between paragraphs. Earlier, you learned about summarizing and paraphrasing when taking notes. In the next few sections, you will learn these techniques in the body of your paper to weave in source material to support your ideas. Summarizing sources. And when you summarize a source, that's also known as a paraphrase quote. When you summarize material from a source, you zero in on the main points and restate them concisely in your own words. This technique is appropriate when only the major ideas are relevant to your paper, or when you need to simplify complex information into a few key points for your readers. Be sure to review the source material as you summarize it. Identify the main idea and restate it as concisely as you can, preferably in one sentence. Depending on your purpose, you may also add another sentence or two, condensing any important details or examples. A summary restates ideas in your own words, but for specialized or clinical terms, you may need to use terms that appear in the original source. So, paraphrasing sources. When you paraphrase materials from a source, restate the information from an entire sentence or passage in your own words, using your own original sentence structure. A paraphrase source differs from a summarized source in that you focus on restating the ideas, not condensing them. Again, it is important to check your paraphrase against the source material to make sure it is both accurate and original. Inexperienced writers sometimes use the thesaurus method of paraphrasing. That is, they simply rewrite the source material, replacing most of the words with synonyms. This constitutes a misuse of sources. A true paraphrase restates ideas using the writer's own language and style. People usually see encouraging outcomes after reviewing, because it is hard, quoting sources directly. So when you quote sources directly, this is known as a direct quote. Most of the time, you will summarize or paraphrase source materials instead of quoting directly. Doing so shows that you understand your research well enough to write about it confidently in your own words. However, direct quotes can be powerful when used sparingly and with purpose. Quoting directly can sometimes help you make a point in a colorful way. If an author's words are especially vivid, memorable, or well phrased, quoting them may hold your reader's interest. Direct quotations from an interviewee or an eyewitness may help you personalize an issue for readers. And when you analyze primary sources such as a historical speech or a work of literature, quoting extensively is often necessary to illustrate your points. There are valid reasons to use quotations. Less experienced writers, however, sometimes overuse direct quotations in a research paper because it seems easier than paraphrasing. At best, this reduces the effectiveness of quotations. At worst, it results in a paper that seems pasted together from outside sources. Use direct quotes sparingly for greater impact. And I always tell students, one direct quote or one in-text citation per paragraph. So use pie structure. P is the main point from the thesis, I is the in-text citation, E is the explanation of that in-text citation in 5 sentences. So that way you just use one in-text citation per paragraph. So you don't overwhelm the reader with too many numbers. When you choose to quote directly from a source, follow these guidelines. Make sure you have transcribed the original statement accurately. Represent the author's ideas honestly. Never use a standalone quotation. Always integrate the quoted material into your own sentences. Use ellipses if you need to omit a word or phrase. Use brackets if you need to replace a word or phrase. Make sure any omissions or changed words do not alter the meaning of the original text. Omit or replace words only when necessary. Remember to include correctly formatted citations that follow the assigned style guide. Documenting source material. Throughout the writing process, be scrupulous about documenting information taken from sources. The purpose of doing so is twofold: to give credit to other writers or researchers for their ideas, to allow your readers to follow up and learn more about the topic if desired. You will cite sources within the body of your paper and at the end of your paper. For this assignment, you will use the citation format used by the American Psychological Association, also known as APA style. And at other schools, you would use MLA. And so APA is used for social sciences and business. MLA is used for humanities. So citing sources in the body of your paper. In-text citation. Document your sources within the body of your paper. These include 2 vital pieces of information: the author's name and the year the source material was published. When quoting a print source, also include in the citation the page number where the quoted material originally appears. The page number will follow the year in the in-text citation. Page numbers are necessary only when content has been directly quoted, not when it has been summarized or paraphrased. So when you have a direct quote, you need to have the author, the date, and the page number, and you have to have quotation marks. If you have a paraphrase quote, no quotation marks, just author and the date. And then you put the in-text citation inside the middle of your paper, and then you put your reference citation at the end of your paper. Creating a list of references. Each of the sources you cite in the body of your paper will appear in a references list at the end of your paper. While in-text citations provide the most basic information about the source, your reference section will include additional publication details: the author's last name followed by their first name, the year the source was published, the source title. For articles in periodicals, the full name of the periodical along with the volume and issue number and the page where the article appeared. Using primary and secondary sources. As you write your draft, be mindful of how you are using primary and secondary source material to support your points. Recall that primary sources present first-hand information. Secondary sources are one step removed from primary sources. They present a writer's analysis or interpretation of primary source materials. How you balance primary and secondary source material will depend on the topic and assignment. Using primary sources effectively. Some types of research papers must use primary sources extensively to achieve their purpose. Here are a few examples. A paper for a literature course, analyzing several poems by Emily Dickinson. A paper for a political science course, comparing televised speeches delivered by 2 presidential candidates. A paper for a communication class discussing gender bias in television commercials. A paper for a business administration course that discusses the results of a survey the writer conducted with local businesses to gather information about their work from home and flex time policies. a paper for an elementary education class that discusses the results of an experiment the writer conducted to compare the effectiveness of two different methods of mathematics instruction. For these types of papers, primary research is the focus. If you are writing about a work, including non-print works such as a movie or a painting, it is crucial to gather information and ideas from the original work rather than solely relying on others' interpretations. And of course, if you take the time to design and conduct your own field research, such as a survey, a series of interviews, or an experiment, you will want to discuss it in detail. Using secondary sources effectively. For some assignments, it makes sense to rely on more secondary sources than primary sources. If you are not analyzing a text or conducting your own research, field research, you will need to use secondary sources extensively. As much as possible, use secondary sources that are closely linked to primary research, such as a journal article presenting the results of the author's scientific study or a book that cites interviews and case studies. These sources are more reliable and add more value to your paper. Even if your paper is largely based on primary sources, you may use secondary sources to develop your ideas. Avoiding plagiarism. Your research paper presents your thinking about a topic, supported and developed by other people's ideas and information. It is always crucial to distinguish between the people who conducted the research and what you write. Failure to do so can lead to plagiarism. Plagiarism is the act of misrepresenting someone else's work as your own. Sometimes a writer plagiarizes work on purpose. For instance, by purchasing an essay from a website and submitting it as original coursework. In other words, a writer may commit accidental plagiarism in other cases, a writer may commit accidental plagiarism due to carelessness, haste, or when someone doesn't know how to use APA or forgets to do a direct quote. So understand what types of information, and if you don't properly cite your sources, you are committing plagiarism, because you have to give credit to the researcher that did the research. And so when do you cite a source? You cite a source anytime you have historical or medical, historical, scientific, technical, uncommon knowledge, any kind of numbers, numerical data, statistical data, historical data. And so understand what constitutes fair use of a source. Keep source materials and notes carefully organized. Follow guidelines for summarizing and paraphrasing. So even if you paraphrase or summarize a source, you still have to cite the source. Any idea or fact, so when do you cite a source? Any idea or fact taken from an outside source must be cited in both the body of your paper and the references list. The only exception are facts or general statements that are common knowledge. Common knowledge facts or general statements are commonly supported and found in multiple sources. For example, a writer would not need to cite the fact that most breads, pastas, and cereals are high in carbohydrates. This is well known and well documented. However, if a writer explained in detail the differences among the chemical structures of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, a citation must be necessary. When in doubt, cite the source. In recent years, issues related to the fair use of sources have been prevalent in popular culture. Recording artists, for example, may disagree about the extent to which one has the right to sample another's music. For academic purposes, however, the guidelines for fair use are reasonably straightforward. Writers may quote from or paraphrase material from previously published works without formally obtaining the copyright permission. Fair use means that the writer legitimately uses brief excerpts from source material to develop and support his or her own ideas. So, for instance, a columnist may excerpt a few sentences from a novel when writing a book review. Disorganization and carelessness sometimes lead to plagiarism. For instance, a writer may be unable to provide a complete, accurate citation if he didn't record where the source came from. A writer may cut and paste a passage from a website into her paper and then forget to cite the source. A writer may procrastinate, rush through a draft, which leads to sloppy paraphrasing. Any of these actions can create the appearance of plagiarism and lead to negative consequences. Carefully organize your time and notes. So in other words, take time to proofread and edit your paper to make sure that you properly cite your sources to avoid plagiarism. The concepts discussed in this section connects to a larger issue, academic integrity. You maintain your integrity as a member of an academic community by representing your work and others' work honestly and by using other people's work only in legitimately accepted ways. It is a point of honor taken seriously in every academic discipline and career field. Academic integrity violations have serious educational and professional consequences. Even when cheating and plagiarism go undetected, they still result in a student's failure to learn necessary research and writing skills. Students who are found guilty of academic integrity violations face consequences ranging from a failing grade to expulsion from the university. Employees may be fired for plagiarism and do irreparable damage to their professional reputation. In short, it is never worth the risk. Key takeaways. An effective research paper focuses on the writer's ideas. The introduction and conclusion present and revisit the writer's thesis. The body of the paper develops the thesis and related points with information from research. Ideas and information taken from outside sources must be cited in the body of the paragraph and in the references section. Materials taken from sources should be used to develop writers' ideas. Summarizing and paraphrasing are usually the most effective for this purpose. A summary concisely restates the main idea of a source in the writer's own words. A paraphrase restates ideas from a source using the writer's own words and sentence structures. Direct quotations should be used sparingly. Ellipses and brackets must be used to indicate words that were omitted or changed for conciseness or grammatical correctness. Always represent material from outside sources accurately. Plagiarism has serious academic and professional consequences. To avoid accidental plagiarism, keep research materials organized. Understand guidelines for fair use and appropriate citation of sources, and review the paper to make sure these guidelines are followed. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the Professor H Writing channel, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me at any time.